The Arizona sun was setting behind the red cliffs when I heard the scream. I'd been tracking a wounded mule deer through the canyon for the better part of an hour, and the sound froze my blood. It wasn't the deer. It was human, and it was filled with pure agony. I abandoned my hunt and ran toward the sound, my Winchester rifle clutched tight. What I found made my stomach turn. A young Apache woman, maybe 20 years old, was caught in one of those brutal bear traps some fool had set illegally on territorial land. The iron jaws had clamped around her left leg just above the ankle, and blood soaked the ground beneath her. She'd stopped screaming when she saw me approach, but her dark eyes were wild with pain and something else. Fear, maybe, or defiance. "Easy now," I said, raising my empty hand while keeping my rifle pointed down. "I'm going to help you." She said something in Apache I couldn't understand, then switched to broken English. "Leave me. They come soon." "Not a chance," I muttered, kneeling beside the trap. I'd seen these devices before, designed to hold a grizzly. Opening one required strength and leverage. "This is going to hurt, but I need you to stay still." I used my rifle as a lever, pressing down on the spring mechanism with all my weight. The woman bit down on a leather cord she wore around her neck, stifling her cries. When the jaws finally released, she nearly fainted. Her leg was mangled, but not broken, thank God. I tore strips from my shirt and bound the wound tight, then fashioned a crude splint from branches. "Can you ride?" I asked. She shook her head. I was a day's walk from my cabin, and night was falling fast. The temperature would drop below freezing. Without shelter, she'd likely die from exposure, even if the wound didn't kill her. I made a decision that would change everything. I lifted her onto my shoulders in a fireman's carry and started the long trek home. She weighed almost nothing, but after 2 hours my legs were shaking. She drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring words I couldn't understand. We reached my cabin just after midnight. I laid her on my bed, cleaned and properly dressed her wound, then gave her water and some dried beef. She ate mechanically, watching me with those intense eyes. "My name's Jacob," I said. "Jacob Morrison." "Ayita," she whispered. Then she said something else, a longer phrase that sounded sad. She touched the black band on her arm, and I understood. She was in mourning. A widow. I nodded respectfully and moved to sleep by the fire, but she grabbed my wrist. "They come tomorrow," she said urgently. "My people. You not understand what you do." I woke to the sound of horses and found myself surrounded. At least 20 Apache warriors sat mounted outside my cabin, their faces painted, rifles and bows at the ready. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly stood, hands raised, trying to remember every treaty and peace agreement I'd ever heard about. An older man dismounted, his bearing suggesting he was someone important. His weathered face was stern, and silver streaked his long black hair. He approached my door and spoke in Apache. When I shook my head, not understanding, Ayita's voice called out from inside. She limped to the doorway, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch I'd fashioned the night before. The conversation that followed was rapid and intense. The old man's expression shifted from stern to surprised to something I couldn't quite read. Other men joined in, gesturing toward me, toward Ayita, toward her bandaged leg. Finally, Ayita turned to me, her face flushed. "This is Nantai, my father. He says you saved my life. You touch me, heal me, carry me. By our law, you must—" She struggled with the English words. "You must take me as wife." I nearly choked. "What? No, I was just helping." "She would have died." More rapid Apache followed. Ayita translated, her voice strained. "My husband died 3 moons ago, killed by white men who steal horses. I am in mourning. No man should touch me during this time, but you saved my life. The spirits have spoken. You must take responsibility." "This is insane," I said, looking at the ring of warriors. Several had their hands on their weapons. I can't just marry someone I don't even know. Nantai spoke directly to me in surprisingly good English. You take my daughter from death. You see her blood, touch her body, bring her to your home. By our ways you claim her. You refuse, you insult her, insult our people. We are at peace now, but peace is a fragile thing. The threat was barely veiled. I looked at Ayita, who met my eyes with a mixture of resignation and something else, maybe curiosity. She was beautiful, I couldn't deny that, with sharp features and an inner strength that radiated even in her weakened state. Can I speak with her alone? I asked. Nantai considered this, then nodded curtly. The warriors remained mounted, watching, as I guided Ayita back inside. Listen, I said quietly. I don't want to force you into anything. Is there another way? She studied me for a long moment. You could die, she said simply. Some warriors, they want reason to fight. My father holds them back, or... She paused. We marry, but only in ceremony. We not have to be truly together. After time passes, I return to my people. You are free. The ceremony happened that very afternoon in the canyon where I'd found her. I stood there in my dusty trail clothes while Apache women dressed Ayita in buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork. Despite her injured leg, she moved with grace and dignity. Nantai painted symbols on both our faces, while speaking words I didn't understand, but felt in my bones were sacred. When it was over, I was married. The warriors who had seemed so threatening that morning now approached me with cautious respect. One even smiled slightly and clapped my shoulder. They left us with supplies, dried meat, herbs, for Ayita's wound, and blankets. Then they rode away, leaving us alone in my small cabin. The first week was awkward beyond measure. Ayita slept on the bed while I took the floor, despite her protests that I should at least share the bed with a blanket dividing us. We communicated in broken sentences, her English slowly improving, my Apache consisting of perhaps a dozen words. She taught me the proper way to prepare the herbs for her wound, and I taught her how to work the wood stove without burning herself. But something unexpected began to happen. In the quiet evenings, as we sat by the fire, we started to talk. Really talk. She told me about her late husband, a warrior named Naiche who had been killed trying to protect the horses he'd been guarding. She spoke of her mother, dead from fever when Ayita was 12. I told her about my own past, about the farm in Missouri I'd left behind after my parents died, about the loneliness of frontier life. One night, 3 weeks after the ceremony, I returned from checking my traps to find she'd cooked a meal using some of my supplies and her people's methods. The rabbit stew tasted unlike anything I'd ever had, rich with unfamiliar herbs and roots. She watched nervously as I ate. This is incredible, I said honestly. She smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since I'd known her. It transformed her face. My mother's recipe. She teach me before she die. Tell me about her, I said, and she did. We talked until the fire burned low. The turning point came in the 5th week. A group of rough traders passed by, the kind who caused trouble for settlers and Indians alike. 3 of them approached my cabin with bad intentions clear in their eyes. They'd seen Ayita washing clothes by the stream. "That's a pretty squaw you got there, friend," the leader said, his hand resting on his pistol. "Might be willing to trade for her." I stepped between them and Ayita, my rifle ready. "My wife isn't for trade, and you're on my land. Leave." What happened next was pure instinct. The leader drew his pistol, but before I could fire, Ayita threw the knife she'd been using to gut fish. It struck his gun hand, and he howled. His companions reached for their weapons, but my rifle shot into the air stopped them. "Next one goes through flesh," I promised. They gathered their wounded friend and rode off cursing. I turned to Ayita, who stood there breathing hard, her dark eyes fierce. "You could have been killed," she said angrily. "3 men with guns. They wanted to hurt you," I replied simply. I couldn't let that happen. Something shifted between us in that moment. That night, she moved her blanket to the floor beside mine. "If this is real marriage," she said softly, "then we should be together." I took her hand carefully, respectfully. "Is this what you want?" She nodded slowly. "You are good man, Jacob Morrison. Better than I think possible." 6 months later, when Nantai and a small group visited to check on his daughter, he found us working side by side, building an addition to the cabin for the child Ayita carried. He spoke to her in Apache, and I caught enough words to understand his question. She answered firmly, then translated for me. "I tell him I stay because I choose to stay. The spirits brought us together strange way, but sometimes spirits know better than we do." Nantai looked at me for a long time, then extended his hand in the white man's custom. "You are my son now. Truly." What began as obligation had become something neither of us expected. Love, respect, partnership. I'd saved Ayita from a bear trap, but in truth, she'd saved me from a lonelier fate. Sometimes the best things in life come from the paths we never planned to walk.